The apartment had been chosen for its forgettable quality, the kind of place that didn't attract attention, that didn't make itself known to the city it floated above. It occupied the 6th floor of a narrow building whose elevator groaned with every ascent, a place where the walls held the pale yellow of tired light and where the windows looked out not at a street or a park, but at more windows, stacked high across a narrow gap like rows of silent eyes. When Emil moved in, it was late autumn, and the city's noise seemed to mute itself in sympathy, dulled by fog and the quiet resignation of wind that had nowhere to go. He had brought little with him, a suitcase, a radio, a second-hand mattress still wrapped in plastic, and set them down without ceremony on the wooden floor that creaked only once, as if in greeting. The window in the living room faced a nearly identical building across the narrow air shaft, a mere 3 meters away. Most of the windows there were curtained or dark, except for one, a square of warm, unwavering light that hovered almost directly opposite his own. He first noticed it on the second night, glowing faintly through the murk of dusk, not bright, not inviting, but steady. The window was divided by thin black muntins into 4 smaller panes, and behind them stood a man. The man was always there when Emil looked, not moving, not gesturing, only standing. He was about Emil's height, maybe taller, his shape obscured by the grainy blur of the glass and the strange quality of the light behind him. He never leaned forward or stepped away, and his presence might have been dismissed as a trick of shadow and habit had it not been for what happened on the 5th night. Emil had come back late, the rain clinging to his sleeves, his breath misting the hallway as he stepped into the apartment and closed the door with quiet force. The lights were dim, and he didn't bother turning them on. He went to the window, peeled back the edge of the curtain out of a growing compulsion, and there, across the gap, the man stood once again. This time, as Emil watched, the figure lifted one arm slowly, deliberately, and waved. It wasn't a casual wave. It was stiff, mechanical, as though the motion had been rehearsed, or remembered from somewhere distant. Emil didn't respond. He stood frozen, fingertips brushing the cold glass, and the figure slowly lowered its arm, returning to stillness. Then the light behind him flickered once, not like a bulb failing, but like a breath being held, and went out. He didn't sleep that night. He lay on the mattress, the plastic beneath him whispering with every shift of his weight, listening to the thin noises of the building, the soft thud of someone walking on the floor above, the hum of pipes, the distant, indecipherable creak of something settling in the dark. But beneath it all was another sound, one he couldn't name, the sound of space watching itself. The next day, he tried to find the building across the shaft from the street. He circled the block twice, looked up from every angle, but where his window should have faced another set of glass squares, there was only the sheer wall of an internal courtyard. The geometry of the buildings didn't match. From outside, the apartment should have faced nothing. He returned upstairs, heart beating without rhythm, and opened the curtain again. The window opposite was still there. Lit. Waiting. The man stood in his usual place. He didn't wave that time, but Emil could feel the weight of his eyes, not just from across the shaft, but as if they had followed him back from the street, as if they had been inside the building with him. On the seventh night, the wave came again, slower this time. The man raised his hand, fingers splayed in a motion that felt too wide, too measured. Emil, against every instinct, lifted his own hand and returned the gesture. He couldn't explain why. Something about the repetition, the quiet rhythm of it, made the moment feel almost polite. A ritual. A custom shared between spaces. But as soon as he did it, the man across the gap stepped back, disappearing into the dark behind the window, not vanishing, not retreating, but melting into the room, leaving only the faint outline of his afterimage against the light. The window remained lit for the rest of the night. And when Emil woke up, groggy and aching on the plastic-covered mattress, the curtain on his own window was drawn open, though he was sure he had closed it before bed. From that day on, Emil began noticing things he hadn't before. His apartment was the same, but subtly off. The kitchen tap had developed a slow, soundless drip, though the sink remained dry. The floorboards near the window were colder than the rest of the room, as if touched by something beneath. His reflection in the mirror beside the bathroom door blinked a fraction of a second too late. And always, the man in the window returned at nightfall. It became a ritual. Each evening, as the dusk settled and the sounds of the city dimmed into a background thrum, Emil would go to the window, lift the edge of the curtain, and look. And every time, without fail, the figure would be there, waiting, and would raise its hand in that same deliberate, uncanny wave. And each time, Emil felt the impulse to answer grow stronger, not out of kindness, not out of fear, but out of a need to maintain the pattern, to keep the rhythm steady. Because he had started to understand something. The man across the gap wasn't just waving. He was counting. The air inside the apartment had begun to feel thinner, as if it no longer offered oxygen so much as permission to remain. Emil moved slower now, his gestures smaller, not from exhaustion but from the weight of the silence that pressed in on all sides. He no longer checked the time, not out of apathy, but because the clocks, all of them, had begun to pulse instead of tick, their hands twitching in place, circling half-seconds like insects trapped in amber. The only constant was the window, the square of light across the narrow shaft and the man who stood within it, unwavering, patient, silent. By the 10th night, Emil no longer questioned the ritual. When darkness fell, he stood at the glass, curtain already drawn back, and waited for the figure to appear. The moment came not with motion, but with awareness, as though the apartment itself alerted him, he is here. The wave followed, always the same, always slow. And Emil returned it, not with hesitation, but with the grim necessity of one who has long since accepted that he is no longer performing the gesture, but being made to repeat it. The fear had dissolved into routine, and then the routine had dissolved into something else, a soft decay of self, a thinning of the line between what was outside and what was reflection. Emil no longer left the apartment. Not because the door wouldn't open, it still did, physically, with the right pressure, but because beyond it was only a hallway that grew longer with each day, dimmer, its walls darker, as if forgetting color. The elevator still worked, technically, but the last time he took it down, he found only a mirrored version of his floor at the bottom, same walls, same door number, same window facing inward. Only the lighting had changed, it flickered, and the hallway smelled faintly of wet paint and breath. He had not descended again. Inside, the apartment had grown smaller. Not physically, but perceptually. The walls no longer obeyed consistent dimensions. The ceiling felt lower at night. The corners of the room, once right angles, now bent inward slightly, giving the impression that the room itself was leaning in to listen. Objects shifted places when he wasn't looking. The mattress rotated 90 degrees in a single afternoon, and the kitchen stool moved each night to face the window, a detail Emil chose not to acknowledge. But the most unsettling change came not from the room, but from the window across the shaft.